My perception is that the Earth itself is moving in, has already begun to shift to a different position within the skies. That there's a physical adjustment happening, which is also part of a vibrational shift which is happening.
Mhm.
And insofar as the vibration of the planet is moving higher, the actual molecules that make up the physical body and consciousness as we understand it, as best as we can, is moving faster and expanding. That's a progression, and it has been in motion now for quite a number of years. The Mayan calendar, if I'm not mistaken, it ran to like 2012. It said like
Exactly.
the end of time is 2012. But really, what they're saying is the end of the unconscious phase for human existence runs till around 2012,
The end of the cycle.
the end of
Absolutely.
the end of a cycle. And in and around 10, 12, 14 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark, consciousness started to expand quite quickly, and
Mhm.
it's on an accelerating basis,
Yeah.
which is to say that each year offers more potential for the embodiment of light than the year before.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift. And, even in a way, the shift is aligned with what's known in the yoga tradition as the yugas, which are like the four ages of consciousness.
That's right.
Where you go through the golden age, the silver age, the bronze age, into where we are now, the iron age, or
Okay.
the times of darkness, the times of technology, which is known as the times of Kali Yuga. And this is it. And it's the time when we're so separated from the gods that we actually believe that we are the gods.
Well, and that's part of the influence that I believe is being promoted by a hidden presence that has been among the human race for a very long time. And actually, from their perspective, we're the nuisance. They're the intelligence, and we're more the useless eaters. But that's an aside, and we can get into as a separate conversation. Insofar as we're in the Iron Age, but consciousness is now expanding, and the call into the enlightened state is being made available in ways that has never been available before. So that's to say that the embodiment of light into the human experience is allowing us to shift forward into the next level of consciousness or the next density, which refers to how much light can be packed into a single space. Right?
Definitely. I mean, according to, again, it comes down to our own personal and therefore collective awakening.
That's right.
And this is also one of the paradoxes of the current age, that the easier we make life through certain advancements around technology, that's not to say in any moment that these technological advancements are wrong or not beneficial, but with the ease of life and with a certain enslavement of consciousness that comes with it, it dumbs people down. It makes people actually less prone to resolve challenges.
And take responsibility and tap
Yeah,
into their essence and seek truth and meaning in in their relationship with themselves and other selves.
yeah. They
Yeah,
just become
it's
consumers of what's being fed to them, and what's being fed to them is unfortunately
oh
garbage.
yeah. And so when they devote their attention to that, well, to whatever that other source is, then the light of their being is actually being diverted into that source.
Mhm.
Right? It's where you put your attention. So if you have a screen addiction and all day long you're consuming content,
Absolutely.
then you are in fact being used in that enslaving quality to contribute into the digital reality,
Yeah.
just by
And
virtue of you participating in it in that regard. And so in yeah,
and
and
the content you read and is basically what you're consuming. So the vibration of that energy that you are consuming, which you can see in a lot of things that here, it's either horror in the mass media, like
yeah,
war or violence or rape,
yeah,
assault, various kind of, which
fear,
really,
crisis,
really puts
tragedy.
a huge emphasis on the insidious nature of the perversion of humanity, let's say,
Yeah.
which is, and then also in the social media, a lot of very puerile, superficial, image orientated moronic content, which is not creating any expansion of consciousness. It's just turning people, well, for want of a better words, into country hicks,
Well,
completely dumbing them down.
it's aligning them with the interests of the digital,
Mhm.
right? If we think about the nature or the divine, right, which is to say creation on one end of the spectrum, you have that which expresses the love of creation, and then you have the opposition or that which is otherwise opposed to the love of creation. And so, whatever that is, that black hole, that nothingness, that empty hollowness that leaves you otherwise unfulfilled, the more and more you go down that path.
Yeah, a darkness, a darkness of emptiness. It's
That pure temptation, usually rooted in hedonism, is the easiest path most of the time because it lacks responsibility and ownership and all the high vibrational qualities that otherwise come with creation.
absolutely, and you see that within the human experience, actually, that hedonistic approach to life is ultimately unfulfilling.
Yeah, but you have to often traverse that path for long enough for the
Ah,
realization to come to you of its meaninglessness, usually.
yeah.
And some people never, apparently, you can go down that path for a very long time. But to come full circle, because you asked about the election. And so, in
Mhm.
regards to my perception that the vibration of the planet is moving higher and that this is happening actually beyond anything that the human race is doing, it's en fait accompli, as the French would say. It's going to happen. The future is a very positive timeline.
Absolutely.
And so it's just a matter of whether humanity decides to participate in that future positive timeline or decides to go down its own path, which ultimately will be incompatible for that future positive timeline, or usually a bifurcation, which is what I anticipate happening, which is those that are called into consciousness and can see into the goodness of creation, feel that pull forward into that higher vibratory state and start to embody the purity of their being and start to move down further and further down that path.
Mhm.
In the context of the election in the US, I feel like if nothing else, the administration that will take office in the new year will buy more time for the consciousness to expand and more people to awaken into that dichotomy, which is now taking over on the planet.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, there's definitely a shift in consciousness, and that shift in consciousness, as you said, has been very strongly felt since 2012. And the paradox with it is very certain um, troubling events, let's say, or dramatic events. So 2012 was the end of the world, of course, the most recent end of the world. And you can see, as I said, going through these times, we had the whole thing with COVID, and various things going off. And actually, one of the interesting things that's happening with Trump is also that is, and even though this still falls under the realm to a large degree of conspiracy theory and is dismissed by a lot of people, but he's actually starting to talk, even at that level, at governmental level, of a certain hidden agenda and a hidden, let's say, hand of control that,
It's a hidden presence.
a hidden presence, which he's standing up against and saying, well, actually, the only way to defeat you is to bring you out of the shadows.
Yeah. And so I believe that he's aware of his mission. I believe that he's aware of his mission. I believe that his human self was largely under attended to for a long time.
I think is the type of character that, I mean, because he has a huge ego. He has a huge ego.
Yeah.
So
That
he's the type of character that if somebody went to him and gave this look, we want you to do this. We want you to make America great again. We want you to revolutionize America in a whole new kind of way that brings, benefit to everybody, you know. he's
He
going to
would
go
he would step right into that role.
absolutely because
Oh, so
he's Donald Trump. He wants and he wants to be known for being
I,
well, that wonderful man that he believes he is.
well, so I read a wonderful um, biography on Stalin, and Stalin was this unbelievable statesman. His political skills were second to none, but he was also profoundly flawed as a man. And when you read about, I mean, because he basically was in power through the most arduous times in Russian history, and a lot of people suffered, but they also defeated the Nazis, and so there's a lot of good for the planet that you could pull out of if you were really looking for it. And what the biography had said, and it made perfect sense to me, was that his flaws matched the flaws of the people that kept him in power.
Mhm.
And I feel that if you had a man who was carrying a really beautiful, very high vibration, was otherwise operating from a place of purity, he wouldn't have mass appeal. I feel
Yeah,
I feel like a guy who says that the Mexicans are rapists has a better likelihood of garnering the popular vote based on where the
yeah. I mean,
consciousness of the collective
I have
is.
to say, there is an area of playing politics in all of that,
And I
and
think that he just has appeal. I don't think you or I or the people that we know that are on this path who may be really well intended and capable of doing incredible things for the people around us or for example, for our country, I don't think we would ever get elected because we don't have the same mass appeal. The ego's not present, the showmanship isn't there, the desire to just kind of like say crazy shit and get attention for it's not there.
I think this is the main thing that there is a certain game in there that's actually um, you can see that such people and such characters, if you like, are not concerned about offending anybody.
Well, he's a Gemini. He loves the provocation.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
loves
yeah.
the
But
controversy
you
and the
also, but
drama and being the
this is
center of
quite a,
attention and then
this
the
is
contradictions.
quite a state you notice with a lot of, and it is a natural characteristic that needs to be embodied by a statesman, let's say, that he's going to stand for certain principles and certain beliefs. And if he's got himself into a position of power, it means he's somehow aligned himself with the resonance of the egregore that he represents. He becomes the figurehead of that collective consciousness.
He's a movement. He's not a man. He's a movement at this point.
Yeah, yeah. He is the representative of that movement,
He's a movement. And to be frank, I'm very grateful for his dedication to that movement.
Absolutely. And you can see that even in the first term, there were lots of benefits with that movement. He
Yeah.
brought a lot of things back, and you can see now actually is a number of things of, how to say, trying to make people's lives better. And also, he brings a great deal of, well, probably brings more Christianity back into the White House than any previous president for a number of years
Well, in a backdoor way.
in a backdoor way, but still, they see
He's
this
not,
thing, you see that even as a group, praying, this kind of thing, like, and again, whether how real it is or how much it is part of an image he's creating, but you can see that it fills the whole persona of how to say him being the representative, the savior, God's emissary, if you like, to a
yeah.
certain degree.
Well, that aspect of it is a little doesn't I mean, I just don't believe in the savior complex. There's so many people that are seeking a savior and they're looking to another man to be that embodiment. It feels
But
even in the time of Christ, Christ would say, I may be here to show you the way, but you're going to have to do this work on your own.
absolutely. But you see, fundamentally, any political system is working upon savior complex, right?
Wow. Yeah, it's a distortion.
Absolutely. I mean, savior complex anyway is a kind of distortion of the truth because, as you said, the whole thing with like now is like, okay, we wait for Christ to come and save us again, and it's like, well, hang on, no,
It's the movement.
you were given the knowledge, you were given the practices. It's like now for you to rise, and then people talk about all kinds of things like, oh, the ascension is coming. No, no, the ascension is coming if you ascend.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. It's
It's absolutely,
presented to you. It's
yeah.
available.
And this is exactly what's happening on this planet right now with everything that's happening within this sphere of force of the planet Earth. It is a great opportunity for souls to transform and to evolve.
Do you want to explore this more?
Yeah, we can do, absolutely. It comes down to the paradox of, again, of the intense times, and people talk about, we're living in the end days, or we're living the revelations, or,
There
it's
are many prophecies which proclaim these to be particularly arduous times.
absolutely, and these apocalyptic times, which, it's there in the Gospel of John, it's there in Revelations, and for sure you can make correlations to a lot of the human experiences that are happening now. But you can see that it's actually what happens is that, to a certain degree, what happens in Revelations is that those hidden forces are no longer hidden.
Well, I think that's the literal translation of Revelations, or maybe it's apocalypse is the unveiling or the revealing.
Revelation, to reveal something, means exactly that, is to bring it out of the shadows, to bring it out of the bring it out from hiding.
I think that's what
And
apocalypse, I think apocalypse is getting to the same definition, if I'm not mistaken.
quite possibly, I
An
haven't,
apocalyptic event.
yeah, I've not studied the etymology, so, but for
Yeah,
sure it
no,
could well be.
it's for once I was blind, but now I can see.
Exactly this, and you can see that actually what's happening now with more and more of the intensity and more of what's happening right now in the world, and you can correlate it to a number of things, even generational movements of planets and various things, new ages, new epochs starting right now. Like you can say we're coming into the age of Aquarius finally, for example.
Yeah, but
Um,
what does that mean? I mean,
Oh, I mean, in a way, the age of Aquarius is associated with the movement of Pluto. Pluto is giving the civilizations because it's such a slow-moving planet and it creates generational impact. So a new age is basically a new generation born under a certain influence of transforming things at a planetary humanitarian level. Actually being more and more aligned with transformation that's in keeping, shall we say, with the will of God, or the direction of the flow of the universe, rather than being, in resistance to it. So, and you find that this cycle, 250, 500 years, you see that it's very much closely correlated with rises and falls of great civilizations throughout history.
you're talking about the Pluto transit into Aquarius, or you're talking about the age
Absolutely.
of Aquarius as it
Well,
refers to, because the
I
age
mean,
of
the age of Aquarius, I mean, how do we define an age? I mean, an age is relating to a certain generation of civilization, a certain age of
thought,
consciousness.
yeah, but I thought that when they spoke of the age of Aquarius, I thought it was that the solar system was transiting in its because it makes its own arc through the galaxy and it ends up moving through different constellations in
Yeah,
different
you have
sequences.
this
And
double alignment because the precession of the planets, which takes place every 26,000 years, it's also
that's what I'm referring to.
which
So
is
I end up spending
aligning
a few thousand years in each sign.
aligning with the spring equinox, which is slowly shifting back actually into Aquarius, and actually, technically, I think it's around about 2085. The spring equinox will be astronomically starting in Aquarius, which we can say then that's the start of, and that's going to take place for, as you said, a few
Few
thousand
thousand
years.
years. I know, although
Yeah, about 2000 years.
they sang about it in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In the
Yeah,
70s, you see, it's only 100 years away. 100 years in 2000 years, it's like
I'm
we're
just saying that
almost there. We can
that
see
measurement
it.
gets
It's on
screwed
the
up.
horizon. So,
Yeah, no, but no, and I appreciate that. I feel as though, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you won't. I feel as though those that have woken at this point will continue to move forward, and many of those who have failed to awaken at this point will probably struggle to do so or may not. And
I,
they're otherwise vulnerable to many of the weaponry that's floating around on planet.
I feel they'll be given chances, and this is the paradox in a way about, the spiritual journey and about as we said, the times of revelation and the apocalyptic times, that the more and more of that darkness comes out from the shadows and is more revealed into life. Look, this is what's happening. These are what the people are doing. Then they're not interested in the welfare of you as an individual, the welfare of the countries, the welfare of humanity, the welfare of the planet. That more and more people start to kind of like, well, I mean, the first thing is a rejection of that and a movement towards finding alternative solutions. And you can see again that's aligned with this transition of Pluto from Capricorn, which is representing old structures, and movement into Aquarius, which is letting go of old structures or what's not working in the old structures to give space
Yeah.
to create a new revolution, a revolutionary times, new ways of doing things. And I've noticed myself over the past 10 years, the number of people who are, let's say, out there trying to be a little bit more off the grid, kind of traveling, searching, not sticking into the paradigm of the normal 9 to 5 job and, just eating the regular junk food that's, the processed frozen food of the supermarkets and various things, or, the fast food outlets and stuff. More and more people, younger and younger people, are kind of like saying, hang on, no, this isn't this isn't my vision for life moving forward.
Yeah. And so do you feel that well, I guess it's part of the conversation because I've seen it as if there's different levels of consciousness. And the first basic level of consciousness is awakening to the peril within this reality, which is to say the corruption, the manipulation, you mentioned certainly addiction like screens and all the toxicity that comes with that environment, with social media and such, but also the toxicity within the food, the toxicity within the water and the air, the chemtrails, the understanding of how we're being poisoned deliberately.
Absolutely.
That level of awakening is kind of the first step when you're like, holy shit, I can't trust my government. Like, holy shit, this news source that my parents raised me on, it's
Mhm.
not reliable anymore.
Absolutely. You start to realize that it's again it's not nourishment for the souls. Actually, what it does, it brings in more and more lower vibration. It brings in more impurity into consciousness. And
Right.
if we talk about ascension, if we talk about any kind of form of growth, or spiritual evolution, it only actually comes through purification of consciousness.
Right. And so the first level of awakening, which is, I think, the most basic level of awakening, is the recognition and understanding of the realm for which you've incarnated.
Yeah.
And that's to say, I don't want to put that toxic food in my body any longer. I don't want to devote my time to this toxic media source or this entertainment source. I don't want to support these institutions that are deceitful and otherwise enslaving,
Mhm.
right? Academic or otherwise, right?
Absolutely.
That's the first step into the awakened self.
Yeah. And
That,
some are ready to do it, and some are wanting to do it but not prepared to do it, and some are completely resisting it, and some are rejecting it, and you're
it's
always going
okay.
to have those
Okay.
various different degrees.
Yeah, they take a step in, they take a step back, they get pushed into it, they get pulled back out of it. The people figure it out in their own timeline. The second type of consciousness, which is to the point that you just made, is the journey inward. It's the awakening of self. It's the understanding a little bit more of what it means to be human and in this physical form vis-a-vis the non-physical aspect of your being.
Yeah. I mean, this in tradition is actually where you make the transitional from the, shall we say, the more instinctual animal responses, which are still part of the human being, into the more conscious sphere where we become more actually aware of our own life and our own energies, and what happens when we use those energies wrong, nourish those energies incorrectly, like understanding actually that the life force that's given to us and how to actually amplify that rather than waste it. because we spend a lot of time wasting life force.
Well, it's, we learn by not using it properly. I'm a little bit more diplomatic. Like the human lens wants to try to figure everything out. And at the end of the day, you're dropped into a realm that you really don't have purview into its orientation. People aren't,
Absolutely.
they're not
Yeah.
aware of how, for most of the time. But just to kind of focus, if we were to look at it, in step one is the awareness or the awakened self of the reality around you. This is just generic. Step
Mhm.
two would be the awakening into self, which is to know thyself,
Yeah.
right? And from the to know thyself is to love thyself, is to make peace with what you are, to move into the highest vibrational expression possible, to spill over that love for other self. I feel as if for this reality, most that are incarnate at this time are really just trying to master the first step of consciousness,
Hmm.
which is to say, you know what? This food isn't really good for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to send my kids to this doctor who will inject them 100 times before they're, an adult.
Mm.
It doesn't feel right to me. I don't even know what they're injecting into my child every time I take them. Right? Like that's sort of the awakened self to allow you to reconnect more profoundly with nature, allows for the purity aspect to just arrive more seamlessly.
Absolutely. Right? But this is also where you see for example, that the whole, so that the collective consciousness or the collective movement is actually formed of the individual parts and therefore the individual responsibility. So actually for human consciousness to reach a new level, to start a new paradigm, with that, there has to be enough souls awakening and enough individuals that start that second phase of the journey and take individually responsibility for it in order to be part of a wave of transformation or revolution that will come on the planet that doesn't need armies and doesn't need weapons of mass destruction and doesn't need terrorism, but just actually a much more conscious approach to life on this planet.
Do you know what that number is? How many humans are required to make that possible?
Well, there's many things said about that but I mean, generally, you would say it's 51% to create that tipping point.
It's 51% for a civilization to move down the path of service to others.
Yeah.
But for the consciousness to progress to the next level of consciousness, which is to say, to carry with the planet to the next density, in theory, you only need one.
Yeah.
In theory,
In
you only
theory.
need one. In actuality, from what I understand, there are 500 individuals on planet who are carrying a particularly unusually high vibration,
Mhm.
who have embodied their purity aspect in such a quantity or volume that it has ensured that humanity will move forward to that next level of consciousness. Now, whether humanity as a civilization as we know it will end up forming a memory complex that is otherwise service to others, that's a different conversation. That's the 51%
That's the
polarization.
51%, absolutely. You know,
And even
it's,
in that idea, it's a numbers and percentages. They try to translate through, and they don't. It's vibrations that we're speaking of. The numbers really don't matter.
yeah, we try to how to say statistically analyze it for the
You put it
human
into
mind
some,
to put
yeah,
it into
some
a kind of reference
logical.
point, but it
It's
doesn't work that simply.
it's fugazi. It
It is
doesn't really have any real relationship
yeah.
to. No, it doesn't work that way.
No, it's about what you would say is the median level of collective vibration, and once it reaches or passes a certain threshold, then actually you have access to a whole new realm of consciousness.
And that's why you have incarnates here who are embodying so much light. They're actually logarithmically many fold beyond the collective because
Yes.
they're tipping the scales. That's this whole belief around enlightenment, which is to say there's so much light pouring in that you are enlightening. You are spreading the light onto the masses. There's more. You've become a universal frequency and you can just go and express it endlessly as a conduit for that for that source.
Absolutely. And this is also why these beings are incarnating, because they're incarnating from very high level of service to others, to share the knowledge, to share the teachings, to actually
Just to anchor the
bring
frequency.
to raise the vibration, to raise the frequency of those who come into contact with, and especially those who are prepared to start putting into practice the wisdom of the teachings that's being offered to them.
Yeah, so there are some who are serving a role of bringing forth wisdom, but primarily their role is simply to anchor the vibration on planet.
Yeah.
There's no other way for that vibration to really to hold on planet except to assume form, because the human form is an expression not just of your light, but also it's linked to the earth itself.
Hmm.
And your point of arrival becomes a node on that earth grid, which is why the natal chart always orients around your birthplace, because that vibration is fixed at that point of arrival. It's where you enter. You don't you experience yourself moving around, but your vibration is actually anchored at that point upon arrival. There's a specific reason for your arrival at that location on your birth.
Absolutely.
And as
Yeah.
your vibration moves higher throughout your incarnation, you're feeding back a benefit to that point of arrival. And there are incarnates in the millions, but many who have otherwise gone off track. So they're not serving their role, which is part of the consequences of this reality. But there are many who have stepped into their role, who are bringing in incredibly high vibrations that are otherwise hitting those different points on the grid, and they're bringing the necessary vibration on planet to move it forward as intended. And
Yeah.
and that's the primary role for that consciousness that you speak of. They also oftentimes have such an awakened mind that there's wisdom streaming through them as well. And so one of the beautiful benefits is if you happen to be in proximity or get to know them, you can have a lot of that information, that wisdom rub off. But if your consciousness hasn't expanded, then their wisdom is their wisdom. It doesn't necessarily resonate with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also this is part of a, how to say, a covenant their souls have made, of actually, which is referred to as the term as bodhisattva, which is the
Yeah.
idea of the enlightened being, the body, the Buddha being, an elevated being, and sattva are basically of the purity. So the purity of consciousness that's
Yes.
actually making the sacrifice, that's ready to liberate, doesn't have to be here, but comes exactly this to impregnate
The
the
plan.
consciousness into the sphere of the planet and into the sphere of the inhabitants of this planet, until every inhabitant of the planet has reached the level of awakening.
Yeah, whoever's left, anyways.
Yeah, whoever's left, and
But yeah,
it's
that
a kind of, how to say, ultimate service to others, of like, I don't need to be here, but
yeah, but it's like Don said from the Law of One, you have to be somewhere doing something, like might as well be here.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you can see actually being here is coming with inherent challenges that are always, how to say, giving new awakenings, new awareness, because even many of these liberated beings or masters, prophets, great sages, even them themselves are still learning.
Well, so let's okay, that's a good transition. I know we're kind of freestyling today, but I think that's another point, which is I think very healthy to discuss. So I believe that statement that there's those ascended masters are still learning because you're always learning.
Yeah.
But I think what's different about those ascended masters is that they've wandered back into this reality not with the intention of learning, but with the intention of being in service, and that the learning is just the byproduct or the necessary path by which they can most completely fulfill that call to service.
I think learning is just a kind of a natural byproduct of being aware and attentive in the experience you're having, being in the present moment, of,
Exactly.
observing a new reality, a new manifestation, and what
Yeah,
they're learning and what they're understanding may not even be at our level of consciousness.
that's right. And so the collective is learning lessons for the first time. Like if somebody battles with selfishness, right? It may be that on a spiritual level, they've never properly balanced or polarized off the vibration of selfishness
Mhm.
or conceit or greed or whatever the low vibrational quality is. In which case, the learning process is the method by which it's usually quite painful, but is the message by which they're moving their vibration higher. The ascended soul who comes back down into this reality has already overcome those low vibrational tendencies. And so when they're presented with an inclination towards greed, they're not learning it in the traditional sense. They're trying to reawaken a knowing of how to move through it.
Yeah, they've already, how to say, developed a certain qualities at the level of the soul that has already become very, very firmly anchored and very firmly rooted in a beneficial way, so that the temptation that comes that would maybe challenge us, even to stop and think, for them is just, how to say, it's just like batting off a little fly.
Well,
Just like,
yeah, it's
you
it's a
know,
it's a different experience. But
com-
the only one caveat, and this is the teachings that's come to me over the last number of years, is that when you do enter into this physical reality, because you have your source, which is your higher self, true self, multidimensional self, that goes by divine self, it goes by a lot of different terminology, separate. It's the aspect of you which is uniquely your individualized expression, which is the non-physical quality of you that's uniquely you. Okay, it's not this. The soul is quite a misconceived concept, but so you have this higher self that has emanated a life force, and that life force has now embodied form. And so you maintain a connection back to your source. Many people actually, when they get profoundly in meditation, the back goes erect, the spine operates as a antenna. The pure love frequency from the higher self starts pouring in. They feel the body tingling. There's different types of twitching or activity that indicates connectivity. They can feel that they're connected to something.
mhm.
In that reality, they're connected to their true self. The true self, which is that individualized expression of creation, is now in streaming its purity.
Yeah.
In this reality, that source connection, because we've entered into a captured planet, there's something that's not supposed to be there. That source connection has an insert. It has a technology that is actively feeding off of that communication. And that insert ends up integrating with the biology of the body. Insofar as when you start to try to move your vibration higher, you're physically suffering because you're uprooting the low vibrational qualities that have been imposed upon you by the insert, sometimes referred to as the separate self or the slave self. And in the modern teachings, it's the ego. But then the ego also has to explain why we have all these identities or why we get stuck in the past or carry out to the future. And there's so much detail that goes into it. That whole construct is the byproduct of this enslaving technology.
Yeah, yeah, it's a false construct that we identify with, of being very much in the individualized form in the human existence, whereas
Right? This
which
could never, this,
creates this idea of separation when nothing else exists, and creates a kind of almost nihilistic, atheistic
that's right.
um, approach to life, which actually you can see that the more that that gets promoted and the more that that gets popularized, actually creates a much more greater tendency towards a hedonistic, selfish approach to life, which feeds exactly that, maintaining that
That's it.
false identity and separation from, well,
The true self, the divine
from
expression,
the true self, or the supreme self, Atman, as it's referred to in
the
the
higher
yoga
self.
tradition. And but even that journey is, just a stage.
Right. And so the best that you can do in this reality, because you've just assumed the body image, it's just an image.
Yeah, it's a certain shape and form based around a specific vibration,
It's, it's,
according to certain energetic impulses that you came here to embody,
it's
and which basically also sets up the lessons and the qualities and the tests and your life experiences that you will be drawn towards.
Those lessons and those qualities, those tests, that is the byproduct of trying to overcome that system of enslavement.
Absolutely.
It is trying to escape from this reality or to otherwise position yourself properly so that when the reality moves forward, your frequency is matching the new frequency that the planet is operating on.
If you have sufficient awakening to do this, and you develop sufficient willpower to make the continuous effort in that direction, because the let's say the false identity, it also means overcoming the gravitational effect of the false identity. To ascend, like you constantly need to overcome gravity, which is that natural descending, declining, decaying energy, which is where you can see actually even in life, even to maintain the physical body, even to maintain anything that's created in the physical reality, once you've built it, once you've created it, you then have to maintain it. Otherwise, there is a process of atrophy and decay that immediately starts to take place.
Well, especially in this reality.
Yeah, absolutely. In this physical reality.
This physical reality,
Yeah,
all mechanisms are trying to pull you down.
yeah.
They are constantly trying to lower your vibration. And so if you're not operating with a daily practice and devotion to the alternative, you're in most likelihood going to succumb to that lower vibrational pull.
You can see again, you come back to the thing of when you make life easier and keep people more asleep and keep people more strongly identified with this false center or false identity, that actually and make them conditioned to be consumers and not to make considerable persevering effort and awakening even a sense of entitlement,
Yeah.
that
Well,
it's really counterproductive to any spiritual awakening. And even some people who do have some sparks of spiritual awakening, when they step into the spiritual journey and they realize, like, oh God, I've got to deconstruct all of this false identity. And there is a heck of a lot
that's
of work waiting for me here.
yeah.
Immediately, the impregnation of those patterns, which are kind of karmic patterns instilled in this life, maybe instilled from
Well, they
past
could be
lives.
generational, they could be family
Absolutely.
patterns.
Yeah.
They run on
So
so many levels.
so many, and these actually these are the areas that they first have to break down, those obstacles that are actually creating that inner resistance about connecting to the true identity or the supreme self or the higher self, as you call it, and realizing that actually that's work. To be conscious living is basically work of being present in every moment.
Well, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And
So this,
that's the journey, and the thing is, it's a progressive journey.